And amazingly, we're back.
A little bit of a sabbatical there, but...
Yeah, this kind of crazy thing happened where this weird guy came into your room at something like 5 in the morning and stole all of your gear.
It's crazy.
And just ran out of here.
Yeah.
And it's like, where are you going with that? And he's like, back off.
Yeah.
I gotta go record something at your school.
The weird part is he took a horse and buggy here, so I didn't even understand it
Well,
much.
it would make sense looking at this gear that he probably would have taken a horse and buggy to do it. So
Yeah.
that really kind of tracks here.
But we're back.
Yeah, we are, and there's no getting around it. And so the dust is settled, and we have a winner in the NFL. We're a little late to the ball game on it, but I do think a couple weeks of time have passed, and it can give us a little bit of perspective on what happened, why it happened, and I think a bigger question is where is everything going from here? And I know that I have a lot more questions than answers in that category.
I think most teams do.
Yeah, so let's start with, of course, the recap of the Super Bowl. We have only one clip here, really, from the game itself, per your request. Let's quickly bring that up, and because I think it kind of summarizes the game all the way here. Let's take a look at that. That is, of course, our good friend, Mr. Patrick Mahomes, doing what Patrick Mahomes does so well, which is turning defeat into victory. But the narrative changed in this game, Elliot.
Well, here the what they did is, just this throw is insane. First of all, like his feet, he is 100% like parallel to the ground, and he still manages to get that ball like 20 yards down the field. But the Buccaneers, their defense, pretty perfectly built to take on this Chiefs offense. Their front four can get pressure on Mahomes, forcing him to scramble out of the pocket, which he does well, but if you ask him to do it too much, he's going to take some sacks, he's going to throw some picks, and the offense just isn't going to be as productive. And then, because they get pressure with four, they could drop everyone else back into coverage, and their defense, the rest of it, is so young and athletic that while maybe one of them gets burned, there's so many of them back there that another one can recover and go cover the guy. And combine that with the fact that nobody on the Chiefs knew how to make a catch until garbage time when the Bucs were basically just playing prevent, that it just didn't work. Mahomes, this is the first time in Mahomes' career, even going back to his high school days, this is the first time he has led an offense that didn't score a touchdown. Right. Like this Buccaneers team, and
he knew it. I mean, he said this is the worst loss that he's faced in I don't even know how long.
He's not very used to losing big like this, especially not in the NFL. This is only the second time he's been held scoreless, and it's the first time his offense has been held without a touchdown.
Right. Let's talk about that for a second, because really the global question is what went wrong for the Chiefs, and was it a question of what went wrong for the Chiefs? Was it a question of what went right for the Bucs? Is a combination of both? Now, before you answer, I'm going to simply remind you of a preliminary thing, which is we saw this Chiefs team almost fall to two very substandard teams this season.
Yep.
Falcons, and I believe it was
the
Browns, both had them on the ropes.
Yep.
And, the Browns could have eliminated them, had injuries happened sooner.
Yep. Right. And had there not been a helmet-to-helmet no call. I don't know if that would have single-handedly won it, but that would have probably swung some sort of momentum.
Right. So now we get to the Super Bowl with those two things in context. What happened? What happened to the Chiefs here?
Mistakes, which is weird to say, because Andy Reid is pretty big on not discipline. Like, he's not a Belichick where he berates people, but usually his teams aren't too penalty prone. Sometimes in the defense they will, and that's basically what killed him. It was a very extreme version of everything bad about Andy Reid's coaching. Not that Andy Reid's a bad coach, but there are certain things that he's not great at. Their clock management, it wasn't horrible. It's not the reason they lost this game, but he could have probably called some timeouts sooner than he did to at least try to slow down the Bucs a little bit and get his defense to calm down, because that was the big thing. The defense freaked out. Tyrann Mathieu, I think they were, first of all, super confident in themselves. So when they got down, it was a huge shock, and they they're not used to trailing very much.
Let me pause your thought there for a second. Isn't this, though, where that team's used to working?
Yeah, it is, but they had never been down and been so thoroughly dominated for so long. They had been dominated the year before by the Texans, and they were down bigger than they were in this game. But the difference was they were able to come back very quickly. This was the first time that really in the second half they were down and they were dominated. Even last year against San Francisco in the Super Bowl, they were down by 10 in the fourth quarter. But there was always a sense that they could get back because it was only 10 points. And Jimmy G didn't play well in the fourth quarter anyway. So I think the big thing was the defense made plays and the offense managed to capitalize on those. Obviously, Brady had 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He barely got over 200 passing yards, but he didn't need to. Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones both ran it well, and they were just able to eat clock. I mean, they actually, despite the final score, they actually punted 4 times, and the Chiefs only punted 3 times. Now, part of that was the Chiefs also threw 2 interceptions. But the point is, a lot of their second half, they didn't score in the fourth quarter. It was Mahomes didn't have the ball for gobs of time because they didn't need to particularly worry about burying them further than they did.
Right.
So because you didn't have the threat of the Chiefs scoring like 7 touchdowns in a row or something ridiculous like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, overall, it was very odd. Because the Chiefs were dominated, and looking back on it, you could obviously tell they were completely outplayed. But in certain and yards,
right?
They were very close in first downs. They were very close on third down efficiency. They had more total plays. They only allowed 2 more sacks, despite the amount of pressure Mahomes was under, which sort of just speaks to how much Mahomes is able to get himself out of trouble, even though all plays were kind of not because they were either dropped or they got picked off. But still, I mean, honestly, this is the most impressive performance, despite a bad stat line, that I think I've seen in a while. Because if you just looked at the stat line, you'd think Mahomes had. He did, but there were certain times where it was like, okay, that's not on him. Like those drop, like there was that one throw that hit Tyreek Hill in the face mask. Like you have to catch that. Like that was a touchdown if he catches that.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. I'll come back to the 2-shot because for some reason chiming in here. I don't think it was a Mahomes failure.
No, I think he could have obviously played better. I think there were times where, I mean, obviously he had to leave the pocket due to the pressure that the Bucs put on him, but there were some times where he left it, I think, a little earlier than he had, and he tried to play a little bit too much of hero, which usually he do. He sort of that it was like 51-4, and everyone remember he was playing really well. Through 3 picks because he's trying to do so much, which needs for this to they thrive on.
Right.
But sometimes it's just calm down, stay in the pocket for a little longer, keep playing under control, because despite how good the Chiefs on the picks down are, you can at some point you're gonna make a mistake. That's how it is.
Yeah, I think you summed it up nicely. I mean, just to jump in on that, I would argue that I think they get so used to being able to play behind and do well.
Yeah.
That it finally caught up with them.
Yep. And this is a very familiar spot for Brady, but the way he won was a bit unfamiliar because this is the first time that he's won a Super Bowl by more than 6 points.
Mm-hmm.
Every other field goal or 1 touchdown. And he didn't have to light it up. He won the Super Bowl MVP, and I think he deserved it because you can't give it to the entire defense. So Brady was the one player who really stood out.
I think that was a formality at that point.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it was the defense. Period. End of sentence.
Yeah, but the problem is you can't give an MVP a one-person award to an entire defense.
Of course.
And the problem, actually, the defense kind of, I don't want to say undermined themselves because I think what mattered to them most was winning, and they got to win. They all played so well that not one of them stick out, end up winning the Super Bowl MVP. So, okay, well, Brady threw 3 touchdowns, no picks, and he was really efficient, so we'll just give it to him.
Right.
So I think if you could give it to the defense, you should, but you can't give a one-person award to 11 guys.
No, and that's fair. And I think that's fair. So this is obviously a team that is not down and out in the sense of, like, this was their Waterloo for all sense of time.
Oh, yeah, no. The Chiefs will be back. So they'll be fine.
But going back into the locker room, is there... they had problems in the locker room.
Yeah.
Let's just start there and say that they did have problems in the locker room.
Yeah, not in the sense that you see with some other teams, but I think it was less of a internal drama and more of a just too much confidence. I mean, you should be confident as a really good football team because being confident can make you play better, but you can't be too confident to think you're always just going to keep winning. Like, you have to earn it, and you have to remember that you have to earn it.
Right.
And I'm sure they did remember that, but I think there were probably points where, unbeknownst to even themselves, they got a little bit too cocky.
Yeah, and they, combined with the players that they lost, I think it all kind of just sort of added up. But that takes us over to the Bucs.
Yeah.
Now, Brady winning his 7th Super Bowl. I mean, at the end of it, speaking to Tom again, I was happy. I was cheering for the Bucs the whole time because I'm, a Patriots fan and therefore by extension fan because they've stolen half of our DNA.
Surprised they didn't take out.
Well, right, and maybe they'll get real here. Now here it is. Here's this situation. We set this up. Here's Brady showing up for season to a team that obviously nobody thought anything. I mean,
low percentage in major sports.
There you go.
And
right, and so he wanted. I don't want to say the coach lets him walk all over him because that's not what it was.
No.
But they were in the driver's seat.
I think what you saw, it was more Bruce Arians, the way they were running it. A lot of deep throws and a lot of basically before that the Chicago game was kind of the microcosm of the season. You could also say the New Orleans game was part of it. There's several of them, but they really stopped committing penalties in after the Chicago game, which was a huge thing. And then also after the New Orleans game, through 3 picks, no touchdowns, they got completely destroyed. Probably the worst game of Brady's career, if we're being honest. They switched to it had the deep shots in there. It had some Bruce Arians in it, but first of all, the thing you saw was Bruce Arians stopped going after Brady after losses. Like, he wasn't, like, before, he was, like, making comments on Brady's play, and, like, he should, because he's the coach, and he needs to point out when his players don't play well, but it seemed excessive.
Not into a microphone.
Yeah.
That's my take on it.
Yeah, but,
Go ahead.
he stopped doing that, and they did more play action, they did more motion, shorter throws, which opened up the deeper stuff, and that's when they went on, like, a 5-game win streak, I think it was, to end the season, and then obviously they won playoff games on the road. I guess technically won at home, but it was more of a corporate crowd in Raymond James than probably a regular Buccaneers home game. But yeah, I think
here's the ripple effect. Let me move forward with this dialogue then, because here's the ripple effect. Now we're in a situation post Super Bowl where Tom Brady is very clearly perceived as in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I understand what he said. I let Tom do it when I was doing everything.
Okay. Now, you're Russell Wilson's.
Yeah.
You're maybe Patrick Mahomes.
Maybe. I don't know if he'd want more control than he has. I think he's perfectly fine with Andy Reid.
I think, and I don't get that from that dynamic. But I look at a lot of other quarterbacks in the league who, by the way, are no Tom Brady's.
Yeah.
Let's just say that right now. 7 Super Bowls can't be wrong.
Some of them are close to his level right now, but there are probably some who want more control who don't really deserve it.
Right. You've got Aaron Rodgers potentially. I don't want to go back to Dak Prescott because he's a little down and out right now.
Yeah.
But is this a ripple effect through the NFL where all of a sudden all these quarterbacks, it's not even just about the money anymore. It's about the money and control, and is that a dangerous precedent?
Well, let's look at the Seahawks.
Okay.
Russell Wilson. Everyone respects Pete Carroll. I think Russell Wilson respects Pete Carroll as a coach. I think everyone in the Seahawks organization respects Pete Carroll as a coach. And I think all the fans do. I think people around the league do. But you've noticed the Seahawks' old owner died, I think, last year towards the end of the season. And from that point, he was the guy who hired Pete Carroll. And pretty much everyone in the organization now has been there for not as long as Pete Carroll. So Pete Carroll has most of the power in the organization. Sure. There's no one who can really tell him no, unless it's like everyone says no besides Pete Carroll. And even then, he might just overrule them. I think Pete Carroll, I don't think he should fire Pete Carroll, because I think he's good, but I think his offenses are very archaic. And I think he's wanted to change that for a while. And they traded away one of his better offensive linemen a couple of years ago, and they've kind of neglected the offensive line for as long as he's been there. But, I mean, let's look at another team. Let's look at, like, Green Bay. I think if you're Green Bay, you don't want to change the dynamic you have in the locker room right now. I think it's perfect because Aaron Rodgers has the perfect situation for him. I don't care what anybody says. There's not a situation in the league better for Aaron Rodgers unless its job opens up or Kansas, and neither of those jobs are opening up because that Green Bay roster is really good. There are a couple of things they need on like defense, but they have the receivers. And before you say, well, I mean, there's Adams and no one else. No, he doesn't. He has Robert Tonyan, who's really good now, and then you also have Sam, who I will probably made better by the fact that Aaron Rodgers is throwing to them. But you can't be bad and put up the stats that those two guys do. Plus, you got Aaron Jones, who, even if he was in the offseason, they have backs who are pretty good. They drafted one last year. I think it is fair to say that they don't trust him enough because they obviously drafted the quarterback in the first round last year and traded up to do it. I don't think he should have done that because he didn't end up being the backup. He was the third stringer. But I think if you're Aaron Rodgers, you don't want to change much. You just caught a bad break in the NFC Championship of Kevin King getting burned at the wrong time, and then your defense committing a penalty at the wrong time. And then he just couldn't convert on the plays where he really needed to convert down the stretch. But, I mean, let's look at another team. The Cowboys. I don't know if our coach, Mike, he's the guy in Green Bay. I can't remember his name now, but I don't know if he's the right guy, but I also don't think you can give Dak Scott a contract. But in terms of, let's go back to what you were saying, of players wanting more power, I think that is going to be something you're seeing. But from one guy, because as big as some of these guys' egos can be, I think they're also all smart people who realize, okay, I don't have the pedigree of Tom Brady, and I'm not the number backs who are, but most of them aren't. The big thing.
Yeah, and that part I don't disagree with. I from a impartial location, yes, but these are egos.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, every athlete in professional sports has somewhat of an ego.
Right. And here's Tom Brady, and I'm just going to go. He's probably the greatest quarterback.
Yeah.
In the league's history.
Yeah, and I mean the only other player you can argue is like Jerry Rice, and it's pretty impossible to compare those two because they play different positions.
No, you can't. Yeah. And what I'm getting to is you can't tell Russell Wilson, you can't tell Aaron Rodgers that, you can't tell them that no, you're not a Tom Brady. In their mind, they believe it. They just don't believe that they've been able to prove it.
Yeah.
And so, in their minds, I am willing to bet they believe they deserve every ounce as much as Brady does.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to have repercussions. I mean, had Brady gone to somebody who was a much stronger coach and done this, I don't think this conversation would be out there.
No. And I mean, Bruce Arians isn't a bad coach, but he obviously doesn't have the pedigree that Bill Belichick does.
Absolutely not. And as much as... I look at Bill Belichick right now, and he's dealing with a bit of a dumpster fire in New England. And I don't mean like he's dealing with zero talent. What I mean is they cannot seem to get whatever it is that they're trying to do up off the ground.
Yeah, and we'll get to them later because I have a couple other things I want to say about them when we go to the other teams. But going off of what it's going to come from what the Buccaneers, Brady left a team, and the first year he wins a Super Bowl because of the fact that Tampa Bay's roster was so good that all they needed was a competent quarterback to get to the playoffs, and they got the greatest quarterback of all time, so, ergo, Super Bowl.
Right.
I think he's leaving Seattle. I'm just going to say that right now. I don't think he is. But I think what you could see down the line is quarterbacks who leave teams to go to other teams that have the entire roster built. They just need a quarterback. And what you could also see teams do is even if they don't like their quarterback, they're like, okay, we'll just be bad for a couple more years, the rest of our roster, and then when a big name quarterback becomes a free agent, we'll bring them here and be like, hey, remember what Tom Brady did in Tampa when they had that great roster? We have a great roster. You're a good quarterback. Let's win a Super Bowl. Which, is it going to work out every time? Absolutely not, because that's just not how it's going to work every time, because you're not going to get Tom Brady every time.
Right.
But I think you could see something like that down the line, especially with, like, a Denver, because Denver has a pretty good roster. If, like, Deshaun Watson goes there, I think I'd pick them to be a dark horse for the Super Bowl. I don't think they could win the division, just they're in a division with Patrick Mahomes and now Justin Herbert. But they could be a really good team. Or if Deshaun Watson goes to even Carolina. They'd have to trade a lot of stuff to get him, but they still have a pretty good roster. They just need a quarterback and then maybe another year to get a couple more players, and they'd be a contender, which would basically it would be pretty bad news for the Bucs. It's like, hey, we finally got Drew Brees out of the division.
One more question on this, which is, we saw this Bucs defense dismantle the Saints, then the Packers, then the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
Moving into next season, is this defense the defense of the league?
Not in the entire league, but it'll be up there. I mean, it already was kind of up there. People already recognized it was pretty good defense, but the problem was, even right before the playoffs started, the biggest worry for the Bucs was the secondary because it felt undisciplined. I don't know what happened, but they just got really good. I think Washington was a good lead-in because they don't have a super good offense, and it was a good just way for them to be like, okay, this is what we're going to do against the really good teams. It worked against these guys, and then they went against New Orleans, a better team, but Drew Brees still isn't as good. So it's just like, it was like having a big wheel and then going to a bike with training wheels, and then facing Aaron Rodgers was like riding an actual bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I don't know if it'll be the best defense in the league, but what they did do is they showed you how you stop this Chiefs offense.
I think they showed you how to stop just about any offense.
Well, yes, but I think more specifically, because we already knew, like, it was possible to stop Drew Brees. Drew Brees has had bad games before, and we knew it was possible to stop Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers has had bad games before.
Do you think they were on a lucky streak, though? I mean, that begs the question. Do you think that the reason why the Bucs defense got to do what they did is because consecutively they all had bad games?
No, I don't think it was luck. I think they caused the quarterbacks to have bad games. I think with Drew Brees, it was probably a little bit less so just because Drew Brees is like 42 and he just he's aged well, but he hasn't quite aged as well as a Brady. But my point is, with how we hadn't seen anyone truly stop the Chiefs' offense before this game, and they showed you how you do it. Have a really good front four, and then drop everyone else back into coverage. And obviously, you still need to have talent back there. You can't just do this with any old defense and stop the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. But that's how you do it. That's how you stop them from getting 50. And I think I give Todd Bowles a lot of credit, not because the game plan was super complex. He ran cover 2 for most of the game. That's not anything too complex. But he took a huge gamble, and it paid off big. The Chiefs basically said, we're not going to use anyone else extra to block. We're convinced that our 5 linemen can block your 4 linemen. And Todd Bowles took them up on that gamble. He said, okay, and I'm convinced your 5 linemen can't block my 4 linemen. And it paid off. He was right. He dropped everyone else back into coverage, and voila, 2 picks. They had, I think 3 sacks on Mahomes. They had him running around all night. I think I read a stat that said he ran something like 470 total yards behind the line of scrimmage or something. Like someone measured that out.
Right.
So I think
some of it in exactly the opposite direction, by the way.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, he is a guy who... Deshaun Watson is a guy who... He steps up into the pocket when he scrambles. Lamar Jackson is kind of the same way. Sometimes to go to the side and then out. Mahomes runs straight backwards and then straight to the side. He doesn't move up very often unless you give him all the room in the world. So, I think this Tampa Bay defense is going to be really good next season. And I think... I don't know if they'll be the best in the league. But they'll be up there. They will be a very scary team to go up against.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it there. Obviously, another very satisfying. You know, it's funny. I will say this as a Patriots fan. It's almost like I feel like we won the Super Bowl. Just because there was so much Patriots down there.
I wouldn't quite akin it to that, but it did feel good in the way that all I heard last offseason, or not all I heard, obviously there were people who believed in this Bucs team, but I heard a lot of people saying they're not even going to make the playoffs. Yeah. They're going to be horrible. It's like, come on. Even if you don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl, you got to admit they're going to be good.
Right.
I don't know. I genuinely didn't understand the people who said they're not winning more than 5 games. It's like, let's assume Brady is god-awful. They won even 7 games with a quarterback who turned the ball over 35 times.
Right.
And now they have Tom Brady.
Right.
I'm done. I'm done.
Okay, so moving on. So let's move on to our good friends over here. The ones, well, let's just say their season didn't end at the Super Bowl. And, we've kind of talked a little bit about some of these teams. Obviously, on this first page here, we got the Bucs there. And we've talked a little bit about the Patriots and so forth. Any teams that stand out in that list to you?
I just want to go to the Patriots quickly. I want to start with them. I thought we would have more answers this offseason than we do. I think, because the problem is, at number 11, that's our pick, I think we have to take a skill position player because the best quarterback we'd be able to get there is Mac Jones, something like that from Alabama, who isn't bad, but he's going to thrive as a more Baker Mayfield type, like a point guard type of quarterback where he's not going to make plays on his own. You have to put playmakers around him, and he's accurate, so we'll be able to get it to them, but he's not going to be a guy who can lift an offense from being bad to being good. So I think we take a skill position player like Kyle Pitts, the tight end, because we need a tight end on this offense badly. And then I think in free agency we go after like Chris Godwin's a free agent. What's his name? Allen Robinson's a free agent. We need a true number one receiver. Maybe we get that through the draft, but I think it's better if we take a tight end out of the draft and then a wide receiver through free agency because we need a veteran wide receiver, and there aren't that many good tight ends in free agency. But in terms of quarterback, you could try to run it back with Cam Newton for a year. And I don't think that would be a horrible idea because it would be interesting to see what he could do if you put some more guys around him and the offensive line got healthy again and then see what he can do. Because we're also going to get the opt-outs on defense back, so our defense will be better than it was last year.
Is that a big factor?
I think so. I don't think it'll be as good as we were in 2019, where we were holding guys to like 15 points a game, and we were winning games like 9-6 or stuff like that. But But
if you think about it, in the not too distant past, I should say, the Patriots' defense was pretty remarkable.
That's what I'm saying. Is I don't think once we get those opt-outs back, I don't think we're going to be as good as we were in, like I said, 2019. Mm-hmm. But I think we'll be better than we were last year. And we weren't even that bad of a defense last year. We just didn't have all our pieces.
Right.
But let's see what other teams. I do want to go to. They're not on this.
Let's go on to the next one. Yeah.
Let's go to Colts.
Okay.
Because they just got Carson Wentz, and that is a team who in my opinion, I believe they're either going to be a very, very good team or they're going to have a top 10 pick in the draft next year. Because either what you're going to see is the return of 2017 Carson Wentz with Frank Reich, because now he's got his old offensive coordinator back now as his head coach. Mm-hmm. They also are going to protect him. He has better weapons and a better running game. Also, I believe, a better defense. So you're either going to see a return, maybe not of MVP level Carson Wentz, but a pretty good Carson Wentz. Or has Philly ruined him to the point where you can't fix him and he's just going to turn the ball over? And I think it's a gamble. I like it by Chris Ballard, the Colts GM. I like that they took the chance on him because I do think he deserves a second shot, but I don't know. I think it's probably 65-35, like 65% chance it works, 35% chance it doesn't. And I mean that's the thing in this league. You got to take big swings, or you're going to be stuck in mediocrity. And I mean the Colts were good last year, but they just weren't good enough because they had to play a really good Buffalo team in the first round.
Right, they've gone from Luck to Rivers now to Wentz.
Yeah, technically it was Luck and then it was Brissett in 2019.
That's true.
But Brissett didn't play all 16 games. They had like Brian Hoyer at one point or something, and then they had Rivers and now Wentz. So that could be interesting.
Yeah.
What other teams do you got here?
Well, I'm looking at a few here. You know, there's some that we've talked about. You know, there's something that strikes me in a lot of these teams that are up there, but will they ever get beyond like the top 10?
Yeah.
You look at things like, oddly enough, now the Browns, and you look at now the Bills.
Yeah.
Washington.
Yeah.
The Dolphins seem to be getting some traction now.
Mm-hmm.
But here are some teams that will be really good, but not great unless you burn the chemistry down, I think, a little bit. I mean, are there teams within there?
Maybe a little. I think here's the big... let's start with the Browns.
Okay.
The Browns sort of... I'm not going to say caught fire because they weren't like beating incredibly good teams, but they did get better towards the end of the year. And you really saw it after, unfortunately, Odell Beckham Jr. went out for the year. And I have no ill will towards Odell Beckham Jr., but I do think the offense is better without him because Baker isn't so focused on feeding him the ball. He has Jarvis Landry, and then he has a bunch of guys like Donovan Peoples-Jones who are good but not super of a somewhere. It's like I just think there's another Patriots traded for him. I think good for the Browns and the Patriots, because let's say the Patriots got rid of like one of our good corners for Odell Beckham. We need a receiver, and the Browns need a better secondary. That benefits both teams. Another team, the Dolphins. I don't know if we hit on them last time, but I'll just go quick with them. Tua is really good. I think they'll make the playoffs next year because they won 10 games and they didn't make the playoffs. That's not going to happen again, and I don't think they're going to regress at all because Brian Flores is probably the only Belichick disciple who's worked because he hasn't tried to be Belichick. He's being Brian Flores, which is good. I think the question you have to ask yourself is maybe don't Tua this offseason, but you can't hold on to him for like 5 years and have him not get better. I think if you play him this year and he doesn't get any better, you do seriously have to consider trading him. Just because this is a league where you need playmakers, and Tua is a guy who he can make plays, but can he do it consistently? I think he has the potential to, but he has to show you that.
Right. We can move to the next screen if we need to here.
Sure.
I mentioned the Bills. I think the Bills have a potential to get better and better.
Oh yeah.
It's nice to see what Washington's doing there. That's always very heartwarming to see them doing okay.
Yeah.
Especially I've got a little bit of fondness in my heart for the quarterback and his journey. But moving to the next screen here, let's take a look. We've got let's see if anyone jump right out at us. Well, okay, there was one on the... Let's just talk about the New York franchises for a second, if for no other reason than to bust on New York for just a little bit.
I'll say this. I think the I think I'll pick the Giants to win the NFC East next season. I'm serious.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think I would genuinely pick them to win the NFC East next year.
Is that saying much?
No, but... It would be the playoffs, which is a lot more than they're used to for the past decade.
Fair.
I think what you saw last year. Let me see what was their record. They weren't far back from the division win. To be fair, that division was pretty bad all around.
Well,
so
none
5
of them had
wins.
a winning record.
No,
right? No. I mean, it's just so weird to me to think that can exist for an entire division.
They were 6-10, and they were basically either hoping. They were basically just hoping for the Eagles to beat Washington, and they would have won the division. They would have gone to the playoffs. They won 6 games, and I think if you get one more big play receiver in there, their offensive line woes. They don't have a great offensive line, but it's getting better. Mm-hmm. Which I think when you have Daniel Jones, who isn't, again, he's not incredible, but he can move, and he can make the throws you need him to make, especially if you give him another year just to develop. If you get Saquon Barkley back, their running back, and you give them one more big play receiver, and then just another year with Joe Judge to get the cohesion up in the locker room, and for him to install what he wants to do, I think they could win, it doesn't sound like much, but I feel like they're high end. They could win 9 games and actually win the division, because I don't think there's anyone else in this division. Maybe the Cowboys if they got Dak back. Yeah. But even then, it would still be close, because the Cowboys' defense just isn't good. So... Right. They get into a lot of shootouts, and it's hard to win a bunch of shootouts in a row. But going to the Jets...
Yeah.
I think what you do, you trade Darnold, you try to get a second-round pick, right? Because I think that's what he's worth. I think, had you traded him a year sooner, I don't think they should have traded him last year, but had you traded him a year sooner... Because last year, he had an okay season. He won 7... games out of he only started I think 13 games. He won 7 of them, so he was 7-6 as a starter. Mm-hmm. He put up some nice numbers towards the end of the year. I think you might have been able to get a second rounder and a player. Now I think you only get a second rounder, but I think you got to trade him just because you need picks and you need more talent. And Darnold just isn't giving you what you need. You have the second pick in the draft. You can get Justin Fields, or you could trade Darnold with a package to get a guy like Deshaun Watson. You'd have to trade a lot, but you could get him.
I think you'd have to give away the store.
Yeah, and I think, just talking about Deshaun Watson for a second, that's the big problem you're going to run into. A team that's been rumored to be looking for him is Carolina. Carolina, the rumored package that they'd be willing to give up to get him is Christian McCaffrey, their running back, and 3 first-rounders, which is probably what Deshaun Watson is about worth, because you can get a quarterback with those first-rounders, you can get a couple other guys, and you have Christian McCaffrey, who's really good. But the problem you see with Deshaun Watson is he's a victim of his own success because whatever team trades for him, they're going to have to give up a lot, which means like, oh, I'm going to go to a team with a really good roster. Well, when you get there, their roster might still be good, but it's not going to be as good as it was when you were looking at it because they have to trade so much to get you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean is if you give away the store on trying to do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it seems like it needs a solution for some teams to get something.
Yeah.
I don't really. Anytime a quarterback demands those kinds of trades or demands obscene amounts of money, I kind of wonder if they're killing the cow.
I think in certain cases you see that, but I think Deshaun Watson, it's slightly different because I think everyone recognizes at the point the Texans just aren't a well-run organization. That's just what it is. Their owner is not particularly great at his job. He said, actually, no, that was their old owner. He resigned, but it's just overall the McNair family is not very good at running football teams. Yeah. Let go of J.J. Watt. They literally couldn't find a trade enough for J.J. Watt. And I just think. I think in certain cases you're right, because with like a Dak Prescott, it's like they can pay you all that money, but they won't be able to put the roster around you that you need. But with Deshaun Watson, I think he has to get out of Houston, or he's going to end up having his career wasted, Andrew Luck style. And right. When you're a quarterback, you just can't have that happen to you. Mm-hmm. So,
all right. Well, let's move on to the last page. Time is moving on here, and let's see what we got there. We've got any teams of real interest here. Well, that was just okay. There was only a few left there.
Well, let's talk about the Falcons.
Let's
talk about the Falcons.
What do we know about the Falcons?
With the Falcons, they're a team that I think I like Matt Ryan as a quarterback. I think he could go somewhere and win in this league. I just don't think it works. It's the Sam Darnold thing. He could go somewhere and win in this league. It's just that it's just not going to work there specifically. So I think, and this is kind of an out there thing. They could be a team that's in the Deshaun Watson hunt. There haven't been any reports about it, but I think if I was them, I'd at least try a trade along the lines of like, you give up Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and then like two firsts, or maybe a first and a second to try and get Deshaun Watson, because they'd still have Calvin Ridley. They'd still have a pretty good offensive line. They'd need to fix up their defense, but they could do that through later rounds of the draft and then free agency, because they have actually I don't know how their cap situation is. I'll look that up, but. They're a team that I think just needs to change at quarterback. Like, they're ready probably to win either now or within the next couple of years. But it's just not going to work with Matt Ryan because, again, he's good. It's just something about it just hasn't worked.
Right. They get a couple exciting moments during the season, and that's the end of that.
Yeah, they're a team that just collapses when you need them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a thing where you just have to change the guys there and you have to change the culture. And you're not going to be able to change the culture when you have your old star quarterback, your old star receiver. They did get rid of the coach, which is good. Mm-hmm. But Julio Jones and Matt Ryan, again, Julio Jones is still really good, and Matt Ryan is still pretty good. They could win in this league, especially if you keep them together because they've already got that rapport. They just need to be somewhere else.
Right. It's almost like they're still haunted from 51. You know what I mean?
It's hard to get rid of that when you still have the bulk of your roster.
Right.
That was in that game.
Yeah. So moving on here to a question, which may not be quite sports related. WandaVision. How's it doing?
I like it.
Yeah.
I'm still holding out hope that they don't do a season 2 because I just don't want them. I'm going to be real. I like the show, and I don't want them to do a season 2 because it just won't work, I don't think.
Right.
They've got a weird tonal mix that I think works in some degrees, but also kind of makes me confused when I'm watching the episode. Like, at the end of the last episode, spoilers, by the way, if you haven't seen the recent episode of WandaVision. Agnes, she's been, I don't know, they have like that song about she's been ruining everything behind the scenes or whatever they said.
Right.
And they put this like goofy song on that reminds you of like, I don't know, some like cheesy sitcom. Which it's funny. I liked it. Mm-hmm. But it comes right after she like, I couldn't quite tell what it was. I think she was like controlling Wanda's mind or something. It's a weird tonal mix that I think works with that specifically, but I think they ought to be careful because if they do that too much, it could ruin some of the more emotional moments later on.
Yeah, I think they got a more fundamental problem. and this was where I was straight. Okay, this is, I think, the first bit of scraps that Marvel has thrown us since Endgame. One might argue. Okay, no, the Spider-Man.
Yeah, they had Spider-Man, but that's
Okay.
it. That's been it, and it's been
that
like
was
2
like-
years since that movie.
Right,
Yeah.
and partially because of a pandemic. So here's this first thing that Marvel is going to give you after all this time, and you spend 2+ episodes going, "What the hell is this? What am I sitting in front of?" And I'm just thinking maybe they would have been better off releasing the Falcon and the Winter Soldier first.
I just don't think it was ready. That show was supposed to come out like a year ago.
I know.
I just don't think it was ready, which does make me worry about it because things that have that big of like production setbacks usually end up suffering with the final product. I trust Marvel enough to think that it'll still be good, but I do worry about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, getting back to WandaVision, it's very much different from what they usually do, despite having actually kind of the same tone. Like it's got like the action, or not even quite the action, but it's got the suspense. It gives you the thrill with like all the same like funny beats, but it's a parody. Marvel doesn't usually do parodies, so I found that very interesting.
Well, you got Deadpool.
Well, yeah, but that's Fox.
See,
That's
okay,
Fox.
But this that they're doing probably would have flown better. I know that obviously it's Fox, but what I'm simply saying from a Marvel perspective, this is a Deadpool series.
Yeah, you could have done something like that, and they actually do have the rights to Deadpool now because they bought Fox.
Right.
So they could have done something with that. That would be an interesting idea. A show like this with Deadpool, but
Probably would make more sense, and you could probably have more goofy fun with it.
yeah.
Right.
You'd probably have to make it less for kids because that's just how Deadpool is as a character. But
I've sat through a lot of little fan theory stuff on how they're really trying to bring in the Fantastic Four, and this is the way of getting the X-Men universe into Marvel, and maybe it is.
that's actually not a bad idea because
Right.
Agnes, the witch, is part of the X-Men thing. She's the person who like trained Wanda Maximoff to do all the stuff she does, and usually she's a mutant
Right.
because she's the daughter of Magneto. Usually,
Right. Well, and that's just it. Is that Quicksilver from the X-Men universe,
Yeah.
son of Magneto.
Yeah.
But in the MCU, those two were created by Strucker.
yeah, they were using the Space Stone to give her mind powers to turn a town into the 1950s because plot convenience or
Right.
something.
Instead of the Reality Stone or whatever. But I don't know.
So yeah,
Well, we'll see. We've got one more episode to go. And for the NFL, obviously, they've got some downtime now. We're headed into the NBA.
yeah.
And
We got some, actually some pretty big, just overall stretches coming up for some teams.
Yeah.
And the playoffs are getting closer. Not super close, but they're getting closer.
Yeah. But we got to wrap it up there for now. If for no other reason than I'm run out of space on the hard drive of this computer that we're recording on, and we'll call it there.
Apple.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us. Hopefully we won't take as long to get back to you with whatever we do next.
Hopefully not.
There it is. And until
Maybe if
then,
there's some big NBA results that will come back, but
right. There it
we'll
is.
just see. We'll see.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.